How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on the 2022-2023 winter season for the United States and determine whether or not we'll experience a snowier and colder than average winter for the United States, or a warmer and less snowy than average winter for the United States this year for the entire lower 48. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. So let's begin by taking a look at the ENSO outlook over the next several months, and you do see that we're expecting a La Nina phase for the summer months, including the hurricane season, which I have been talking about over the past several hurricane season videos I've made. But headed into the fall and winter months, you see that the chance of a La Nina does subside, where we do see the La Nina probability go down over time to the point where now a neutral phase is almost evenly as possible, and in fact a little bit more than a La Nina phase at this time. Now there's still uncertainty with the forecast, it could change, but I think the most likely scenario is that we will experience a weak La Nina, or either a weak La Nina or a neutral phase, as even if we do experience a La Nina, it's going to be very close to the point where the sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific, equatorial Pacific region will be close to a neutral phase, that we should experience weak La Nina to neutral pattern phase conditions, which should both conditions, a neutral phase and a weak La Nina, are very similar to each other, so that gives us a little bit more certainty in terms of what type of conditions we'll experience in the United States this winter, despite the uncertainty regarding whether or not we'll experience a La Nina or a neutral phase headed into the winter months. Now, taking a look at what typically happens during a neutral phase, which is a pretty likely scenario for this winter, we do see that it's typically a lot colder than average for the northern United States, including the northern Midwest, and it's a little bit more colder than average, even compared to what you typically experience during a La Nina in the Northeast, which could mean that the Northeast could be in for a more colder and snowier than average winter for the 2022-2023 winter season. And we do see that for the southern United States during a neutral pattern, it's typically warmer than average and a little bit more moist than average as a result of the subtropical jet moving a little bit further northward, which allows a lot more troughs to impact the southeast with a little bit more moist than average conditions during a neutral pattern. And taking a look at the Pacific jet stream, you see that it goes straight towards the Pacific Northwest, so you should experience a little bit more moist than average conditions and cooler than average conditions as a result of the influx of troughs moving through as a result of the Pacific jet stream. So taking a look at what happens during a La Nina, though, it's mostly similar. We still do see that pronounced jet stream dip that brings a lot more cold air further southward. More sickly, the Midwest experiences much cooler than average conditions, as well as the Pacific Northwest, even more so thanks to a variable Pacific jet stream. And the Northeast still does typically experiences cooler than average conditions during a La Nina, especially during a weak La Nina, but it isn't as cold as what you experience during a neutral phase. And we see that during a La Nina, it's typically a lot drier than average for the southern United States, since there isn't really a subtropical jet moving through, unlike during a neutral pattern. And when it's drier than average, we should also expect warmer than average conditions, since dry soil heats up a lot faster than moist soil, which is certainly something to keep in mind when making this forecast. So based on ENSO neutral pattern, we should expect a colder and snowier than average winter for a lot of United States, and a warmer than average winter for the United States, and a little bit more moist than average in the southeast if a neutral pattern were to happen. But we also need to take a look at several different factors before we could jump to that conclusion, because the current factors we're experiencing this year may not necessarily apply to what historically happens during an ENSO neutral or an ENSO weak La Nina pattern. So that we need to take a look at several different factors, and one of those patterns is taking a look is taking a look at what happens during a weak La Nina compared to the relative long-term average between 1991 and 2020. So pretty much what I did is that I pretty much compiled all the weak La Nina winters, which includes the 1954-1955 winter season, 1964-1965, and even more so, and pretty much put them in a climate division data plot to really give an idea of the temperature anomalies in a weak La Nina compared to the long-term average. And we clearly see that it's a lot cooler than average during a weak La Nina compared to the long-term average, especially more so for the northern Midwest, and this includes the Northeast as well. The only areas where it's not cooler than average is the Southeast, but for majority of the United States during weak La Nina pattern, it's a lot cooler than average, which is at least something to keep in mind when making this forecast. And in the areas where you aren't necessarily experiencing much cooler than average conditions or around average conditions when it comes to a weak La Nina compared to long-term average, I'd actually expect maybe slightly above average temperatures instead in the areas where it's close, where you see it's closer than average, because we're currently in a drought that right now that this data plot necessarily can't detect, and also we're in a positive Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, which does raise the sea surface temperatures and as well as the air temperature, typically along the Gulf Coast. So that's something to keep in mind. But we need to take a look at other factors such as the precipitation anomaly for a weak La Nina compared to the long-term average between 1991 and 2020. And you see that most of the southern United States experiences drier than average conditions, and in the areas where it's a little bit more moist than average, we see that Idaho's involved, Montana, and extending to the Midwestern, the Great Lakes as well, it's a little bit more moist than average. But you see that much of the southern United States is experiencing drier than average conditions during a weak La Nina. So that's at least something we also need to consider when making this winter forecast, that we could be in for a little bit more of a colder and snowier than average winter for the northern United States, as well as a drier and warmer than average winter for the southern United States. But we need to take a look at other factors such as the Drought Monitor, which is very important because typically with a drought, it's very difficult for a drought to go away, as even though the winter is still months away, it's very difficult for a drought to just go away overnight, which is the reason why that it's a good way to forecast what type of conditions you'll experience. Because if you're under a drought, chances are you likely will stay in a drought for the next couple months. And we see that much of the western United States is under a severe drought outside of the coast of Washington and the northwestern portion of Oregon. So based on this, we should expect drier and warmer than average conditions this winter for a lot of the western half of the United States, because it seems unlikely we're going to see this drought go away, especially since we're in a La Nina pattern. And even if we do transition into a neutral pattern, that still does bring drier than average conditions for a lot of the southwestern portion of the United States. So I do expect this drought to continue into the winter months, which should allow for a much warmer and drier than average winter to occur for a lot of the western half of the United States. And in terms of the eastern half, you see that that isn't necessarily the case. And in fact, the drier than average conditions over here could allow for more precipitation than average along the eastern half of the United States, because of course all that water vapor needs to condense somewhere, and there needs to be at least somewhere where there's an equal amount of an upward motion in the atmosphere compared to the downward motion in the atmosphere we're seeing along the west coast. And that upward motion, that convective energy should move towards the eastern half of the United States, since it's the only area where it isn't drier than average and inhibited by just a strong sinking motion in the atmosphere. So this could allow for more moist than average conditions this winter for the eastern half of the United States. So that's another factor we're going to need to keep in mind headed into this winter. And now another thing that's very important is taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, because they really determine not only the air temperature along the coast, but as well as the amount of convective energy you experience, because if the sea surface temperatures are warmer than average, the air temperature will be warmer than average, and the air will be able to hold a lot more water vapor as a result of that, and we'll see a lot more convection since the warmer air is lighter than a cooler air mass. And you see that a lot of the eastern half of the United States is experiencing sea surface temperatures much warmer than average at this time, and we'll have to wait and see if this continues into the winter, but most likely it will continue into the winter months, because we are in a positive Atlantic multivector oscillation, which keeps sea surface temperatures much warmer than average for the Atlantic for a prolonged period of time. And it's very difficult for the sea surface temperatures to change from here up until winter. So I do expect the warmer than average sea surface temperatures to remain along the coast, which I think should allow for more convection to occur, as well as slightly warmer than average conditions along the coast especially. But I don't think for the Northeast that's enough to offset the fact that you will experience a neutral pattern, which will bring cooler than average conditions for the Northeast. And unfortunately, I think that could create a much more unstable environment right around Northeast, for much more nor'easters and snowstorms and blizzards to occur. So that's only a big concern you need to worry about along the Northeast. And taking a look along the West Coast, you see that sea surface temperatures are mainly cooler than average, so air should be a little bit more stable as a result, and maybe cooler than average along the coast of California, Oregon, as well as the state of Washington. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And taking a look at the CFS model forecast when it comes to precipitation anomaly, you see that it's expecting much drier than average conditions for a lot of the southern United States. But I'll take the CFS model, the climatology model, with a grain of salt at this point, because it does change a lot from now up until the winter months. So we need to wait and see how much this changes. Don't take the CFS model completely out of context, because it does change a lot until we get really close to winter. So make sure to keep that in mind. But it is fairly accurate when it comes to the precipitation anomaly, as it very does mimic what typically happens during a weak La Nina. So that's something to keep in mind. Now taking a look at the temperature anomaly over the over a 3-month average. So taking a look at that, the CFS model is expecting a much warmer than average winter, but I'd take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it to heart, because I don't think it's really gonna the CFS model does change a lot, and this pretty much contradicts what happens during a neutral pattern or a weak La Nina. So don't take this I wouldn't take this to heart, as the CFS model is definitely bound to change over the next several months. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing I want to show you guys is the Arctic Oscillation forecast, because that's another important factor. Because if we do see a positive Arctic Oscillation, then we're more likely to see the cool air stay in Canada during the fall months, and then it'll come down cooler throughout the United States. So definitely keep that in mind for the United States. But in terms of my winter forecast for the entire United States, I'll start with the Northeast. So for the Northeast, I expect many snowstorms and blizzards. I'm expecting this because we're going to experience a neutral pattern, which should bring a very significant jet stream dip, and combined with the fact that sea surface temperatures off the Atlantic are much warmer than average, that will create a very unstable environment for many nor'easters to develop, for many snowstorms and blizzards to impact the Northeast coast. So expect a much colder and snowier than average winter for the Northeast, and pretty much the entirety of the northern United States. This neutral pattern or a weak La Nina, whatever we experience, it should bring much colder than average conditions for the northern United States, as well as snowier than average conditions as a result of a pronounced jet stream dip. That should bring a lot of Alberta Clipper systems down into the Midwest and eventually into the Northeast. So that's going to be something to keep in mind. And I'm expecting cooler and more moist than average conditions along the Pacific Northwest as a result of the Pacific jet stream moving through. So keep that in mind as well. That should bring a lot more troughs along the coast. And then for the southern United States, the Southeast, I'm expecting it to be a little bit more warmer and more moist than average, because We should see the subtropical jet move northward, which typically happens during a neutral pattern. And of course, the sea surface temperatures off the coast are warmer than average, so I think that should create a more convective environment where the upward motion is a little bit stronger. And I'm expecting it to be very warm and very dry throughout the southwestern portion of the United States. Since I don't expect the drought to go away, we're going to continue to see a very strong ridge build over the next several months, and that should create a strong sinking motion for not a lot of convection to occur. And during a neutral phase, we typically do see drier than average conditions as a result of a very strong ridge building. So I think that's something to pay very close attention to for the Southwest, as I don't expect this drought to go away, but conditions should be very nice this winter. It should be warmer and drier than average. So this is my winter forecast. If you want even more specific forecast, make sure to comment down below your specific area or location. I'll make sure to give you guys more specific forecast regarding the winter you should experience. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. And I hope you guys all have a great day.